and He creates what you do not know. God Almighty is truthful. We live today in a world saturated with material things that scare our sight from another world, a balanced and darker world, a world that hides behind blindness. Most of us are afflicted by absolute logic. Whether we like it or not, they live among us and around us. They see us from where we do not see them, and they are smarter than we think. They are more malicious than we think. What we believe is fear. If your soul has a price, will you sell it or buy it? How will you put an introduction to a journey that has begun and has not yet ended? Will we engage in that old debate again about whether the underlined letters in this blog are a book or a novel or something else that we have not yet begun? I asked two questions that were not received. This is the nature of the mind of the questioner who does not. It always stops and keeps me in trouble. Blogging was, is, and will remain a part of my life. But what is worthy of blogging? History. Thoughts. Proven knowledge. Does everyone who writes down a letter wait for permission or advice from someone to do or not do? Any text that is written derives its strength from reading it, and that strength increases when they see themselves in it. We, as human beings, are wired to sympathize with those who have suffered like us. If I wrote a text about the pain of separation from a mother, many would see themselves in those words, and I would not need an argument to present them in order to convince them of those feelings and the extent of their strength and impact on us, because they lived it themselves, and I only weaved it in front of them so that they could feel it again, so it makes no sense to try explaining the truth of these feelings to those who have never experienced them. In the past, people faced a problem with those who came up with a new idea, but today the matter has evolved to fight it. Even those who have just an opinion. The sources of ideas are a disaster, but the sources of opinions are a disaster by all standards. We have moved from monsters that refuse to change or change to monsters that prey on everyone. Whoever even thinks about that in reality, we are not obligated to respect the opinion if the one who has the opinion does not respect himself. The most beautiful discussions are those that are devoid of attempts at persuasion, but that is very rare in the age of intellectual monsters. There is a difference between those who hate freedom and those who hate free people, and mixing them between them is fatal to all of you. You have the right to hate my ideas. But if you transfer that hatred to me, this is enough to put you in a cycle of neglect from which you will never get out. Despite many people talking about deep discussions, I am the least likely to discuss with others. The soul of a stubborn fool is much longer than the soul of a logical person, so you will find him head-butting anyone who disagrees with him in his opinion. There is no mind in that head to fear damage. Madness is a relative matter, and we are all mad to varying degrees. Some of us are good at hiding our madness, while others practice it with complete freedom. Consequences, fear of consequences is the safety valve. It is the shackle that guides our minds and directs the reeds of our behavior and actions. When I see a message entitled "The Scene That Made Millions Cry," I know in advance that I will not be among them, and I am happy for that. I left the herd a long time ago and was content to watch them from afar in my isolation. That isolation provided me with many answers, from which more questions emerged. I shared some of them with those around me to follow me in their lives, and some of them broke their silence only to call my son crazy or a liar, and my favorite of course is "Do you pray?" The last phrase has been said to me a lot, and I don't know why he was right when he said to me, "Don't tell anyone what happened to you, no one will believe you." But we will not be prevented from mentioning that because we are sure that people will ignore what you will say. He told the truth, but he is a lie when he said, "No, someone believes you," but he ignores those who have gone through their world even briefly. Dear people, they are between a believer and a skeptic, consumed by questioning. Some of what I will write in the following pages is a corrupt part of me, but I discovered that it can be a cure for others. I will not talk about parting with my mother, but I will write about something else, something I wrote and am still writing about today, and I will write about it tomorrow, even if it is private diaries. The difference now is that after the first book I am no longer alone. Many saw themselves in some or all of what I wrote about myself. This is not a novel or a book. It is just part of the diary of a person who was described as crazy for most of his life without it, and he is still writing it down to chart the stages of his death that began on the day he was born and did not. It ends at 0 point after the events you went through. It ended with my return from the Atlas Mountains. It was expected that I would embrace you physically and mentally, see doctors, and live in a great spiral of insanity and dementia, but this simply did not happen. After I returned to my room that day, I lived a very normal life and was content with my previous work, and at that time I was almost a year old. Normal life did not exist. It was not that bad. On the contrary, it gave me a lot of time to breathe life into previous interests that I had abandoned. I gave up on many things, but my regular visits to my friends had not stopped since my return, and most of my concern during that period was the satisfaction of my mother and father only because I had realized His blessing after God and His universe. One of the reasons for my escape from any predicament I fell into in the past or may fall into in the future is my mother wiping my forehead while I was practicing one of my favorite hobbies, which is putting my head on her lap and listening to family news. She says, "Why don't you tell me what's on your mind?" What's on my mind now is the rest of the story you were seeing. A while ago, she asked, has my cousin returned to her husband, or is she still on a relationship with him? My mother pulled the bangs on my head, smiling and saying, "You know what I really mean." "I don't know, mother." "Tell me about the matter that I told you about yesterday, and before yesterday, about going with your brother to the sheik." By nature, I am not an easy person to obey, even if I became convinced that I was wrong about one of the many characteristics. The bad thing about me, but the only person whose request or command I could not refuse was my mother and father, of course, but she was the one who brought back to my life her concern for an enemy I had not seen for years, walking around, a brother who was said to be treated with the Quran. Some of you, of course, read in the previous sentence that I say that Islam or the Quran is my enemy. Review the phrase carefully. Then continue reading. "Why do you want me to go to him, mother?" I said it while my head was still in her lap and her palm was constantly wiping my forehead. "I want to check on you and what I am complaining about. This is what the sheik will tell us." I laughed uncontrollably, and sadly my mother returns to her previous fear and I go back with her to that day when she took me to stay at home. "Clay, tell me what that is." My mother kissed my forehead and said, "No matter what you do, I will never be upset with you." Let me rephrase the question. So, did you notice something about me that worries you? This is yes. What have you not eaten for 3 days? Brother, I told you that I am fasting. How can you be fasting when I see you drinking water during the day? Yes, I am fasting. Only food, and what kind of fasting is this? Do you now see the reason for my concern for you? No, to be honest, I have not seen it yet. You will go to the sheik whether you like it or not, and he will know what is wrong with you. I smiled. What can I do or say other than smiling at the only person in my life who worries about me like this? Let me guess. He came with a recommendation. From my aunt, yes. Do you have an objection? No, not at all. The Creator is good for the qualifications of the people of Baraka. Wasn't she the one who recommended the Omani sheik when I was young? My mother gently slapped my cheek and shook my face. You have nothing to do with these matters. Don't I have the right to know the qualifications of the consultant who will examine me? Do not mock religion, my son. Since when did religion become a man? My mother, I ask forgiveness. God, and I seek refuge in Him from your words. No matter what I said or did, my mother was not convinced or comfortable and was always worried about me, and no matter how much I tried to smile at her and convince her otherwise, her heart or her guide was telling her something else, and frankly, this feeling did not bother her a lot. She acquired some strange habits during the period I spent with Amr. He wrote it, and I was practicing some rituals that may seem unfamiliar and suspicious, but they were useful to me, especially with my activated aura, which requires special care. For example, I discovered that complete darkness enables me to overcome the severe state of insomnia caused by my activated aura, and that light stimulates my alertness, so I painted the walls. My entire room was painted black, in addition to the ceiling as well, after obliterating all the floor windows. I also made it black marble for the same reason and for other spiritual reasons. This of course raised questions from those around me, to the point that the worker I hired to paint the room black hesitated at first and said that this was a strange request that I did not. Someone asked for it before. I was really surprised by his intrusion and his description of the room as a coffin. After finishing his work, my mother said, "Come on, get up and go back to your black room, and I will call you to eat lunch in a little while." I told you, Mother, that I am fasting, and she raises my head from her lap and is about to get up. "You will eat against your will." "I'm here, okay, but don't force me to have dessert." "Well, I leave it to your brother." My eating habit was also affected. I avoided bread, wheat derivatives, and sugar, especially in the first years after activating my aura. Some may wonder why I was keen to preserve it. An activated aura is a double-edged sword, as it offers you many positives, but it must be balanced. If it gets out of control with external stimuli, it may enter into a state resembling insanity and hallucination, and if you squeeze it forcefully, it may atrophy. And from this atrophy also come diseases, most of which are healthy. I realized this fact when I neglected some instructions that Amr taught me regarding aura, and I contracted a disease that affects the nerves for unknown reasons and develops with the patient until he becomes completely paralyzed. In some advanced cases, I had a panic attack when I received the news from the doctor after he had conducted a long series of tests on me, one of which was taking a sample of spinal fluid, which concluded that I had this disease, for which there is no cure other than some hormone injections that may delay its development. It progressed in my body, but it would not cure it. After I passed the stage of denial to the stage of acceptance, I began taking the treatment that was prescribed to me and learned how to inject myself with those hormonal stimulants that cause me excruciating pain throughout my entire body every time I take them. I tried to explain to the doctor that this matter is unbearable and that the pain is disabling my life, and he said a word that I will never forget. "Treatment destroys you in order to build you up." Words that I did not accept and was not convinced of at all, which led me to decide to stop treatment despite the doctor's warning to me. I decided to go for something else, treating myself. The books that I read in Amr's office were not all about magic, as they included books that talked about sciences that cannot be classified, such as medicine, religion, or something that is familiar to us, but it includes sciences that I personally call the science of the ancients, and they are extinct sciences that were practiced by previous nations and civilizations. Among those sciences there were sciences to treat bodily ailments, most of which were simple, not complicated, or expensive, and did not require talismans or anything forbidden by law. For example, when I began to recall some of these sciences and found that most of them advise abstaining from eating a certain type of food for a period and continuing to eat another food for a certain period to treat an ailment like the current one. Some may say, was your illness known at that time? The answer is that these sciences do not treat specific diseases as much as correcting bodies in general, and again, balancing it and letting the body correct itself is like formatting a computer when you don't know what's causing it to malfunction. There are many things around us that we do every day without realizing the damage they cause to us. I had a disease in the nerve of my left eye, and my vision was blurry with effort and heat, so if I took a hot shower or I walked in the sun for a long time, and the vision from that eye became almost non-existent, but after I applied that diet for a whole month, the progression of the disease stopped, and I felt a very big difference, and I began to see better at that time, and after years had passed since the infection, I no longer suffered from anything, and praise be to God, I learned after that treatment or injections which described me pulled out. The markets have proven to have great harm, and modern treatments for my disease have introduced diet systems that are very close to the system I followed. What does this mean? Does this mean that modern medicine is a failure? No, not at all. But it is certainly not the pinnacle of human achievement with regard to treating this disease in particular and many other diseases. This is a private opinion. I do not oblige anyone to take a simple look at the civilization of the pharaohs, and we will know that they achieved many scientific achievements that we stand incapable of today. The closest example of this is the science of mummification. In the present era, we cannot keep bodies mummified for a long period like what the pharaohs did in the past. There disappeared sciences that exceed what we have reached in our present time, and some of them we may never reach. God Almighty said, "And they ask you about the soul. Say, the soul is from the command of my Lord, and you have not been given knowledge except a little." God Almighty has spoken the truth. The knowledge of the soul or what is related to it of spirituality is a science that has been subjected to distortion, exclusion, and attribution in many cases. One of the occasions for magic and sorcery, which is one of them, is the innocence of ignorance. It is our first enemy, because we are the enemies of what we do not know. I believe that I gained something from that knowledge or the knowledge of the ancients during my research among Ammer's books without intending to, and I mixed it with the corrupted sciences of magic and talismans that I abandoned as useless knowledge. I must talk about the stage. An important thing I went through after returning from the mountains. Atlas, specifically during the period that I called normal life, it was indeed normal, but it included some situations with those who came into contact with me and communicated with me during that period, and they were only my family and friends, mostly my friends. As I mentioned, a large part of my day I used to spend with them, and we used to meet on a farm owned by one of them, and this was without doubt exposed me to many confusing situations, especially with my mind, my knowledge, and my new psychology. After I resolved not to return to the talisman, the physical events around me, including sounds and sights, began to decrease significantly, but they did not completely cease to build doubt from time to time about the reality of what I had seen in the past and what I was seeing. From time to time, his aura was still active, but who knows, perhaps I suffered from a sleep disorder or another psychological or nervous illness to this degree. I doubted myself, and in the years I spent with the devil after Ammer's murder, although returning to normal life was easy physically, it is more difficult than I thought, psychologically. I had to ignore and deny a large part of the past in order to live in peace in the present and the future. But of course, what the past is good at is chasing it no matter how much we try to escape from it. I started visiting the farm 2 weeks after the latter returned from the Atlas, and the last time I visited them was about a year ago. So the blame wasn't that big. I was gone. More than that in the past, and they got used to my absence somewhat, and nothing changed. My friends were the same, their bodies changed a little, and most of them gained weight, and all of them got married and had children. Other than that, they were the same people that I had known for years. I will not go into more details about them, but I will mention some of the situations that I went through with them. After my last return, randomly and without introduction, because if I mentioned them all, I would ask for another book. Various topics were brought up for discussion on our small farm. Topics included everything: sports, politics, marriage and divorce, cooking and food, art and artists, everything that takes place in any break. What was not normal was my contribution to. Those discussions were sometimes seen as a joke on my part, even though I was not joking. I remember the first time I contributed my own opinion after my recent return, and that contribution was what broke a barrier that I had maintained as much as possible with my friends. They were the only ones who continued to deal with me as a person before fear, and that was that. The feeling is comfortable for me and is like returning to the beautiful past. Anyway, one of my friends was complaining about the problem of ants in his house, and he said that he tried everything to get rid of them using pesticides and control companies, but they are increasing day after day, and his wife is very upset about the issue, and it reached the point where she asked him to sell the house and buy another house. As a last solution to get rid of this problem, this topic became the subject of a discussion during the break for several days between an advisor and a cynic, and everyone issued fatwas on solutions that our friend tried to no avail. I was the only one who did not suggest anything to him, because the solution that I was going to present to him would not have been accepted by anyone present, so I remained silent until one of them asked me the question directly and said, "What do you think, my opinion? What about my problem?" Ahmed with the ants. "Believe me, you don't want to know my opinion." Ahmed said, "Everyone gave their opinion, and I did not benefit from anything. Tell us what you think." "I don't have an opinion. I have a solution," I said. Ahmed said with some optimism, "Okay. Tell me, I'm so tired of this. The problem is my solution, you will not like a few, and you have no business what I like. I am desperate and sad. Anything. Talk to them." I talked to those with the ants. The council exploded with laughter, except for Ahmed, who frowned at me, saying, "Are you mocking me? I told you that you will not like the solution, but this is the best way to get rid of them." The rest of those who were appeared in the council, by mocking Ahmed and trying to convince him with sarcasm to try a solution that was funny from their point of view, he became angry with them and broke down. However, I spoke to him in a serious tone and told him, "Believe me, I am not mocking you. Try. Most likely, he will respond to you." Ahmed said while shouting at me, "Try it." I retreated from trying to convince him, especially with the weather. The year I made fun of him, I told him not to try anything. Frankly, I did not try. This method was done before, but I read in one of the books in Amr's library that ants are among the creatures that understand human words and comprehend them completely when they are addressed directly. Here I must emphasize once again that the books that I read in that library were not all about magic and talismans, as there was science. Or sciences that were not part of magic and were not part of religion, the science of the ancients that I talked about above. I admit that at first I thought that they fell under the sciences of sorcery, but as the days passed, I saw no harm in them, and I saw nothing but benefit. Of course, this cannot be said in public and in front of people. Otherwise, I would have found myself, at the very least, crucified. I mentioned earlier that those sciences, part of which I learned, were not magic and did not include any seeking help or closeness to the devil or anyone else. They were just a large and huge legacy of knowledge and information that was not announced, unproven, or tampered with. Even I was not sure of its authenticity because I only read it and had not tried it before. I was busy with these hieroglyphs and did not pay any attention to this secondary science, but after I left that world with the intention of never returning, this world floated to the surface of my mind and I began to look at it carefully and experience it little by little with those around me. One of the first experiences I experienced was with my friend Ahmed and the tribe of ants that invaded his house. A few days ago, there was a discussion incident. Ants, and none of us opened the issue for a long time until one of my friends brought it up while we were gathered at the farm while he was playing cards with 3 others and said to Ahmed, who was immersed in watching a football match, "By the way, Ahmed, how are the ants?" Ahmed was silent and did not respond and did not even turn around and remained watching the match in silence. The person who asked the question asked him while I was watching him, with interest. Ahmed said coldly, without turning to him, "The problem is over." My friend laughed as he hit the playing card on the ground. Really, how did Ahmed Ali turn while I was watching him? Our eyes met. I knew at the time that he had tried my method that I suggested to him and it had succeeded, but he did not declare it. The important thing was that the problem is over. At the end of that day, after I left the farm gate and headed to the car, Ahmed followed me, and I kind of expected what he would say. Ahmed said, "You were joking, weren't you?" I was kidding. What is your stupid way of getting rid of the ants? They left because one of the pesticides affected them and killed them, didn't I? I said, did you talk to them? No, no. I talked to them. Do you think I am crazy? There is no problem if your question is meaningless. I said it as I opened the car door. I got in the car and went home that day, thinking deeply about this new science that I had never used before or paid attention to. In fact, I want to clarify something before I resume talking about it. It happened after that night, specifically about the conflict. What took place inside me, what I am certain of, is that I spent 3 years in Amber's office and read a huge amount of books. This is beyond dispute, but when I recalled the first time I read audio talismans, it was to save my brother from Uram by liberating Karini, and the second time from the Book of the Covenant when I tied up Jesser and everyone. What preceded that, starting with the book that my relative gave me, was not a talisman in the sense of a talisman, but rather scattered lines and words and amputated sentences. She attended Daja and led me to Amber. What if everything that happened to me in the past was a fantasy or an illusion because of the talisman that I read to save my brother, especially since he does not remember anything from that day when I opened up fashion with him? On one occasion, no one who witnessed those events is alive who can confirm what I saw. I have knowledge of that library and the hall that was activated. There is no doubt about this, but other than that, I do not know. At that period in my life, I tended to strongly doubt what I saw of the conflicts between the tribes of demons and every entity I saw from that world, Janjan Jesser, all of them. Is it possible that they were a figment of my imagination? Why not? No one saw them except me, not even Ibn Salem. I did not see him after those events, and he could have been just crazy, and I believed him. In any case, let us leave this point in right now because I wanted to share with you the psychological state I went through. During that period, I returned home and decided to try to recall some of these sciences and write them down, but I faced difficulty in doing so, even though they often came to my mind in a sudden manner, depending on the situation, and recalling them was direct and easily present when I was asked or the situation required me to react quickly, and I realized this when I spoke to my mother. While drinking tea one evening, a few days after the ant incident, she was talking about the conditions of our family members as usual, which of them got married and which of them had children, and I was enjoying her because any topic she talked about made her voice feel comfortable and reassuring. She said, "Mom, I spoke to your aunt on the phone today." "Really? How sad is she?" "She is very upset." "May God help her." "Why, what happened?" "Her son has been complaining of pain in his chest for a while. After seeing him, the doctor told him that he is suffering from a serious illness that has no hope of being cured. There is no power nor strength except with Allah." "What is his illness?" "I will not mention what the illness is, but I can say that his treatment is expensive." It was long and painful, but the important thing was what came to my mind at that moment, which was a treatment I had read in one of Amber's books about that disease, which was an insect. Yes, an insect, specifically a specific, yellow-colored type of insect. But how do I tell my mother about it, and most importantly, how do I convince my cousin to take it? I tried to ignore the topic, but I felt a little uncomfortable. From a remorse of conscience, although I am not certain that the treatment will be successful, I am certain that it would not harm him. I decided, after a little thought, to pick up the phone and call my cousin, who was years younger than me, and I told him very simply that the cure was to eat 7 of these insects without cooking, and it was better that they were still alive. Of course, he did not accept my words at first, but for some reason he said, "Well, I will try to spare." If it enters a person's heart, he will raise the white flag of despair and surrender without argument. If you are wondering, the answer is yes. He recovered after he got some of those insects and ate them. It is strange for a patient, What degree of despair a person can reach to do something like this in research about treatment and physical health. Praise be to God who has healed us in our bodies from what afflicted many of his creation. I was happy for him and sad for myself. Am I practicing sorcery? Is what I did something that falls under quackery? The man recovered. Is this what is known as folk medicine? But there are other matters that do not fall under this name. Do you want another example? Let's go back to the farm, then, specifically on the day that Yosef entered us with a large tray of sweets on the occasion of the arrival of his second child, and after each of us took a piece of it and offered congratulations, some expressed their joy and envy for Yosef because he would be free during his wife's postpartum period in her family's house. His wife was kind-hearted, but she was a good companion, and by the way, he did not show any enthusiasm for his happiness. He complained about his daily visit to the doctor with his newborn daughter, and when we asked him about the reason, he said that she was crying constantly and never sleeping except for a few minutes, and that she had become severely dehydrated because she was throwing up everything she ate because of the incessant crying. They were kept in the hospital under intensive care so that she could be fed with serums. When they did not find the problem that she was suffering from, everyone began consoling him and giving him advice, which was mostly from their imagination, because I was suspecting something, and my suspicion was valid. I asked him, "Did you name her?" And Joseph said, "Yes, we named her," but the matter was not settled for me after he said it, and the solution appeared clearly in front of me, and I decided not to be complacent. And if I tell him the truth and tell him to change her name and she will recover, God willing, Yosef said, denouncing my words, "Change her name, and what does her name have to do with the matter? How can I convince this father who was staring at me with amazement that the name he chose for his infant daughter is the cause of her suffering? How can I tell him that her problem is not a disease or a medical illness? How, and most importantly, how? Prove this to myself once again. Science is right in front of me. I do not know anyone who has tried it before, but what is the harm in experimenting? Isn't experimentation one of the means of obtaining knowledge or verifying it? But is it permissible to experiment on people, especially a young child? What makes science and information something certain and reliable? Are they the only ones? The only source of certainty? Worldly science fasting is a religious obligation that we followed for years with certainty without scientific research, and only recently did the West give it the mark of goodness and consider it a habit that is beneficial to the body. Were we ignorant when we fasted in a simple manner without paying attention to worldly benefits? Absolutely not. Or because it is part of our religion, we accepted it without question. What about our other sciences, the sciences of the ancients that they buried? Time. Is it possible that they are all false and untrue? How were we once the beacon of the world? If by what sciences we led the world, there is a missing link. Life is much more complicated than believing that we have seen and discovered everything. Joseph changed his daughter's name, and her problem ended immediately, and another problem began that I suffered from for days, which is: should I hide this knowledge or share it with others? Is it the knowledge that is said to be useless knowledge, or is it another knowledge that people overlooked? At that time, I did not really know. I did not know my friends. At first, they did not always take my words and passing comments on some topics seriously, especially when they were different and conflicting. They did not have any kind of belief in what I was talking about from time to time, and they began, so to speak, to put that knowledge to the test and experiment at times. Therefore, my advice to myself was and still is not to be sycophantic to anyone, but rather to use my mind from time to time and not be afraid of the results, even if they clash with convictions that have dictated to me since. When I was young, I always reminded her that she was not obligated to anything, provided that she did not let her fear of my thoughts kill my mind. See me from where I did not see it? There is a natural mental defense method that every human being has, similar in function to the body's immune system against diseases and viruses that invade it, which is that everything must have a logical explanation. If the logical explanation is absent, that defensive means creates a temporary justification to replace it with whatever comes along, the explanation that his mind can accept and accept. One of our friends entered our break at a late hour. It was not my nature to stay up late, but that night I was engrossed in a program on television and waiting until I finished it, so I left. Righteous. There were signs of tension and panic on his face, so one of those present asked him, saying, "Why do you look so tense?" Sally said with concern, his tone terrified. "I don't know what to say, but I saw or understood that I saw something during my entry a short while ago." The questioner straightened in his seat, and the rest of those present turned their heads and ears with interest toward Sally, who resumed his speech by saying, "I saw. Or I thought I saw, I don't know, a black cat." One of those present responded sarcastically, "Is this all because of a black cat?" Sally said, "I don't understand me. The cat was just standing on its back figure, as if it were a human, waving at me, and I think it was smiling." Most of those present laughed, and some of them laughed at Sally, who showed signs of remorse and extreme embarrassment. From what he said, "But I don't know." Previously, it is possible for such things to happen repeatedly and more than we imagine, so the jinn is a reality and it happens for many reasons, which I was not about to explain to the terrified owner or to the rest of the cynics who convinced him that he imagined what he saw. I could have been silent, but that would be against my most important principles, which is presenting the truth, no matter how annoying it is, because the degree of belief in the unseen varies from one person to another. Some limit it to what has been mentioned to them from scientific and religious sources only, and reject everything else. This is okay and falls under the umbrella of freedom of thought and belief, but it is not a reason to refrain from presenting your opinion, and this is normal. But what is not normal is trying to impose those beliefs by force on others, regardless of whether they are religious, scientific, or other. Even scientific constants, a free person has the right to question them, but he does not have the right to marginalize and seek support from the civil society, and he will become an ignorant aggressor. There are still people who believe that the earth is flat to this day. Should they be fought? No. Should they be resisted when they try to spread this belief by talking about it? No. Should they be banned when their words turn into actions and they start attacking those who do not believe in his belief? Certainly yes. This is the thin line separating the rational and the ignorant. The truth does not need anyone to defend it or to attack and destroy its opposite in order to spread it. Truth is right and falsehood is false. By practicing it, we determine which of them will prevail and flourish, and which of them will disappear and disappear. My friend made a mistake when he told his story to the rest of the group because he was subjected to ridicule. He regretted sharing his mind with them. He was a victim of backwardness. He left behind the principles of thinking and the simplest basics of understanding. Collective backwardness besieged him and forcibly buried his opinion after the departure of most of those who were at the break that night. Sally, who was convinced that what he saw was just an imagination created by his mind, and I told him, "Don't leave, stay with me until everyone leaves." Sally said in amazement, "Why do I want you on a topic?" Well, when the break ended, about an hour after midnight, I asked Sally to take me to the place where he saw that cat, and despite he refused, on the grounds that what he saw was an illusion, as he was convinced. However, I insisted on him going out with me. We walked outside the rest house for a short distance until we reached a group of palm trees. He pointed his finger at someone and said, "There, I saw him standing next to that palm tree, or I thought I saw him." I walked a few steps toward that palm tree until I stopped next to it and put down my palm. My left hand was on her torso and I directed my gaze to Sally, saying, "Here." Sally said with tension evident on his face, "Yes, when you are nervous." "No, not at all." "Nothing. You are not convinced that you imagined what you saw, Are you? Sally said, No, never. I was convinced by the words of the youth. Why, what is the strong argument they presented to you to deceive your eyes? Sally said, Come on, think about it. In the matter, is it possible that what you saw was real, and why not the jinn can take shape? Sally said with concern, Please do not talk about this topic in this place, when we came here in the first place. I am here to offer you a choice, to remain reassured in the darkness of the unseen, or to see for yourself and be certain that you were not. Either way, Sally said, I see what the cat that you saw is most likely a shaped jinn, and we can search these parts for it, and if it is still there, we find it or find someone else, and it distresses it about taking shape again. I can do it in a certain way. Sally said with great fear, No, no, I don't want to see it again, don't worry. He will not harm you. You will only see him from afar if you love. Sally said in amazement, What about? You're talking about how you're going to do it? Just tell me you want to verify what you saw and leave the rest to me. I don't want to. I'm content and comfortable with the idea that I was more delusional than the idea that what I saw was real. I don't know what you intend to do, but whatever it is, I'm not willing to participate. Sally returned after those words. To rest, he got into his car and left. I do not blame him. Ignorance is sometimes a blessing. In fact, when it comes to the other world, I am lonely, depressed, and sad. Some strange questions are repeated to me when I practice my isolation. The most notable of them is, why are you depressed? Why are you sad? Why are you lonely? There is a big difference between isolation and loneliness. The first is a state of self-transcendence without people and others are a state of loss, even if you are among people. I believe that your relationship with yourself cannot bear a third party. Therefore, I find in isolation from people what I do not find among them. Practicing isolation is not only physical, as telephone communication of all kinds, audio or written, breaks the barrier of good isolation. Some people cannot isolation from people because then he will have to deal with himself, which if he is not reconciled with it, he will face many problems in adapting. Those who classify themselves as social as an excuse for their constant desire to go out and mingle with people and attend events that are necessary for other selves are often, and I say often so as not to fall into the generalization cannot be tolerated if they stay with it because it is simply unbearable. I am accused on many occasions of being one-sided in my opinion and not accepting or adopting other points of view and imposing my convictions on others. The story is only that I refute the opinions I hear in front of those who hold them and display my thoughts that oppose them without forcing anyone to do so. Accepting it or even accepting it, but due to the weakness of someone else's argument often and not the strength of my argument, whoever discusses with me sees that I am imposing my opinions on him, not realizing that the one shouting at him to accept them is not me, but rather his mind numbed with misconceptions. I have never dared to impose my opinion on anyone, but I present it from time to time without courtesy and more. My enemies are fierce. It is myself, and I realize that I am talking about things that the mind cannot accept, and the first pain I have in doubting what I say is me, but the decisive factor for me is always the experience and the results that follow after it from the knowledge that I obtained from Ammer's library. I do not mean here the sciences of magic and sorcery, but rather the other sciences for which I have not found a classification. These are sciences for which I do not have a shred of proof except for some scientific experiments that did not disappoint me. Mostly, I gave some examples in the previous hadith, such as the ant incident that Ahmed suffered from. Did I know that this method would work? No. Do I know now that it will work for others as well? No, but what I know. It worked for him and it may just be a coincidence, so advise Nahi. For Joseph to change his daughter's name. The knowledge that I acquired directed me to this advice. Does that mean that every girl is called by a name? Or will what happened to his daughter certainly not happen to her? For me, the matter is unbearable for me to share this knowledge with many people. I will mention another example that I remembered now, and this example may clarify. My problem is with these strange sciences that I acquired from a person close to me and outside the circle of my friends on the farm. I meet him from time to time in a cafe or at the home of one of us, a former classmate, and I have a lot of affection and respect for him, but he knows nothing about what I was exposed to in the past, so I like to talk to him. Tell me. In one of our meetings, he talked about problems he seemed to be suffering from his wife, and these problems were not due to something apparent and known to him, but rather were due to his suspicion that she was hiding something from him and did not want to reveal it, no matter how many times he asked her. So I told him, there is a possibility that you are delusional, and there is nothing, Mason. Believe me, there is something that is disturbing her mood and preoccupying her thoughts. Perhaps the matter does not concern you, and this the reason for not sharing the topic with you is that it has disturbed my life, so it concerns me and what you would do if you knew the reason. Explain that it does not concern you. Will you be comfortable? Yes, what matters to me is that I am not the reason for the issue. Didn't she say that she told you that you have nothing to do with the issue? No, she told me that there is no issue in the first place. This is something provocative. You are hiding something from me if I don't care. Women think differently. Don't make the topic bigger than it is. Let's change the topic. There is no point in talking about it. The topic actually changed and we entered into several other side topics for about half an hour, but my mind did not stop nagging and insisting on me presenting a proposal resulting from that knowledge that he does not benefit from it, and the thing that makes my head feel full after a bitter struggle with myself. I told him, listen, I have a suggestion regarding the issue of your wife. Mason said, what reminded you of the topic? My friend said, surprised that he brought up the topic again. Nothing, but I think I can help. Mason said, how? I am not sure of the method, but drag. You won't lose anything and what it is. This is the way he said it with apprehension, but remember that no one knows what breasts hide except God, and the way he revealed it is just a small window. Mason said, a small window to what? Just remember these words of mine well. Are you going to talk a lot or are you going to tell me? Well, try sleeping in her bed for a few nights. What do you mean by sleeping in? Someone's bed helps you delve into his obsessions and what occupies his mind, and those obsessions will come to you in the form of dreams or nightmares. What are you talking about? What is this strange suggestion? Try it and you may arrive at an answer to what is troubling you. Let me clarify what you are asking me to sleep in my wife's bed for a number of nights, isn't that so? Yes, on the side. Where she used to sleep might trigger that. Distract her doubts and provide any excuse for this temporary change. Well, I will try, but what will I see? Most likely, you will see a vision that will tell you the answer, and if you encounter a problem in expressing it, I have my phone number with you, and you can contact me using the method that I provided to my friend, one of the famous methods followed by spiritual healers, as well as some magicians, although this method has nothing to do with magic, but it is one of the secrets of the profession that they do not divulge to anyone, and only those who have reached advanced stages of this strange science know it. I learned it from Amr directly when he was sleeping in my bed in the library. If I hid something from him and he wanted to know it, he told me its secret later. I received a call from my friend about a week later and he asked to meet me. Indeed, I met him in the same place where I met him the last time. He explained to me that he had tried the method and slept on his wife's side of the bed for several days. I asked him, have you benefited? I saw dreams and nightmares like I said, all centered around the same topic. Quarrels and quarrels with the family. My wife once with her older brother and another time with her mother. The last dream I saw was yesterday, in which she fought with her father with fists. It was a disturbing nightmare. What is the meaning of these nightmares? My relationship with them is good in reality and I have never disagreed with them. I have lived through your wife's worries and concerns. Do you mean that she is fighting with them in reality and this is what spoils her mood? This period no. It is not necessary, but the vision clearly indicates that the reason for her change in mood is because of things that happen because of her family, and it does not have to be a dispute, and she hid that in her chest and did not tell you what it was. So, in order to get the details, you must ask her, but what you wanted was achieved, which is to know the source of the anxiety. Isn't that the case? Bye. Thank you, but what? Everything you have said to me so far is speculation, and I have not confirmed what it will cause after asking your wife. I did not know that my wife suffers from depression. Do not confuse sadness with depression. Sadness is a distress in the soul that is born large for a reason and goes away by forgetting it. As for depression, it is a distress that is born small for no reason and grows non-stop until we suffocate. Your wife suffers from sadness, not depression. My friend took my advice without questioning or doubting, so I found it comfortable to convey it and direct it to him, but humans are naturally not receptive to the idea of trying new things whose source is not known. Reliable sources of information among humans in general are limited to specific categories, the most prominent of which are proven science and divine legislation, or in other words, religion, and it is difficult. It is very difficult for many to accept knowledge that does not emanate from one of these sources for fear of falling into error. Terms such as heresy, superstition, or quackery constitute a major obstacle for many to accept or absorb any new science, as it falls into the category of the unknown, and we are the enemies of what we do not know, even though all proven science began with the unknown. And it's over. With certainty, through experience and research, tell me with confidence. I will present a simple example of how information that I am almost certain of is true is very difficult to transfer and deliver directly to the other party, and requires putting it in an appropriate form so that he can digest it and accept it comfortably. My cousin, who was a mother, from time to time tells me about her problems and frequent quarrels. With her husband, she began to attract my attention, but her troubles with him began and reached their peak in their house, and as soon as she went out angry to her family's house, she suddenly calmed down and was surprised by the reasons that prompted her to quarrel with him from the beginning, and he too, as soon as he left his house after her departure, his anguish calmed down and one of them began calling the other, expressing his regret and his longing, and the waters returned to their course, and as soon as they meet under one roof, they return to quarreling sharply and separate. Thus, the series of my aunt's daughter quarreling with her husband, with its episodes extending over several seasons, has become boring for me and my sensitive mother. A psychologist specializes in the cause of the problem. He will put forward countless theories about methods of understanding and acceptance. The other, respect for both parties, etc. If the same question was directed to another person, I will not mention his approach. He will say that it is weak faith, lack of prayer, negligence in duties, etc. All the previous opinions are beautiful when we hear them and we shake our heads to them with all submission and reverence, but are they useful in all or most cases? I will not answer and will leave the answer to you as everyone. In our family, they contributed to this issue with their opinion, including the domestic worker who works for my cousin, by saying that my father is not doing well, so why not contribute with what I am almost certain is the cause of the ongoing dispute under the roof of that house. But how do I talk to my mother or my aunt? Should I talk to my cousin or her husband? The solution is with me, but for them it will undoubtedly be strange, and formulating it as a solution will make it even more strange. The information concerns salt and its spiritual benefits, so to speak. If you told them that sprinkling salt in the house and its corners specifically and washing the floors with water containing dissolved salt is very beneficial for the psyches of the people of the house because their house is charged with a strong negative energy that makes its residents are in a tense state all the time, and this is the real reason for their constant disagreements. They will look at me with the look of, "Are you crazy?" and this is a matter of optimism for their expected reaction. The percentage of their acceptance of my words and my advice will depend on several factors, the first of which is their trust in the source of the information. But what is the reliable source for humans in general if the information is mentioned in the Quran or Sunnah? So the matter is settled for Muslims. Even if it is mentioned in the Bible, then it is settled for Christians, and it is settled for Jews if it is mentioned in the Torah. Otherwise, it will be heresy. What if the person is an atheist and does not believe in any of the heavenly religions? You will find that the reliable source for him is often modern science, and this, most of the time, the source is acceptable to religious adherents. Science in many issues does not conflict with religion, but the problem is when the source is non-scientific and non-religious. I mean by that, it has not been subjected to laboratory scientific experiments and lengthy research and has not been mentioned in an explicit heavenly text, so that it falls in the middle between them and becomes rejected by both parties. The approach has limited the sources of information and withheld much knowledge from us. The atheist deals with proven science in the same way that the religious person deals with the heavenly books, and by that I mean that he sees in them a reliable source that does not accept discussion, even though science always reviews itself and comes up with theories that constantly criticize what came before them, and yet it remains. The atheist is confident that everything he comes from this source is absolutely true and does not accept discussion. Therefore, when I suggested the solution of washing my aunt's house with salt to my aunt, she laughed at first, then she said, "It is not permissible, son." I did not oppose or discuss because the wall of her belief was too big to climb, even if it was based on a basis not mentioned in the religion at all, or the ijtihad of a jurist without evidence and not binding on anyone. The second factor that may make a piece of information acceptable is putting it under the microscope of experience and coming up with results that suit our beliefs and what we previously believed in. This point is very sensitive and causes major psychological conflicts for many people who have made up their minds. Their attitude to the world and their understanding of what is going on around them, there is a gap of new information without condition or restriction that requires an open mind to what is new, and here I do not mean only religious people. Even those with logic and science, you find among them a synchronization of what is different and new that sometimes exceeds what we see among adherents of heavenly religions. The closest example of this is the year of using a branch of the arak tree for cleaning teeth among Muslims, or what is known as the siwak. The history of this custom dates back to before Islam, in what is called a sunnah. It was practiced by many civilizations and peoples, such as the Babylonians, through the Greeks and Pharaohs, and it became a religious sunnah for Muslims, following the example of the noble messenger, may the best prayers and peace be upon him. Whoever practiced it and encouraged it was not known. Or, more accurately, in the modern era, the West did not accept the siwak habit on a large scale until this habit was mentioned side by side with terms such as modern science proven or studies proven, and they began talking about its great benefits for the teeth and gums and how it is much better and more beneficial than using harmful fluoride-enriched toothpaste and toothbrushes. Traditionally, it spread like wildfire among them and became a good habit after it was unknown and its benefit was doubtful. Many Muslims practice the sunnah of the siwak, following the example of the messenger, may the best prayers and peace be upon him, and his sunnah alone, and with complete certainty that the chosen one, may the peace and blessings of God be upon him, will not say anything to us except that it will have benefit. Whether in this world or the hereafter, most of them were not aware of the many benefits that the West has achieved with its modern research today, and yet it has been practiced for many centuries. Would Arabs and Muslims have practiced the habit of siwak if it had not acquired that religious character? Most likely, the rate of its practice would have decreased greatly. Would the West have adopted this habit if he did not gain credibility with his scientific research? Probably not. What about the civilizations that preceded Islam and the modern era, which practiced it for centuries on any religious basis? Most of those civilizations did not see any of the three known heavenly religions and did not believe in them on a scientific basis, perhaps. These civilizations have reached advanced stages of science, most of them have disappeared, and we have lost many of them. What I want to get to is that there are many, many sciences that we know nothing about, and science is modern, and its door has not been opened and has not been unveiled yet. I tried this approach with my aunt and told her, modern science is proven. Salt is good for people's psyches, and washing the house with it will have a very positive impact on your daughter and her husband. Of course, I do not know how true this is scientifically. I have not read scientific research that delved into this matter in detail and came up with decisive results. The source of my confidence in the information was from the knowledge of the books that I read only. My aunt said, "These are extraneous matters and have no basis for her. And what is the origin that you are looking for?" "My religion. My daughter returned to her husband yesterday and his affairs are not stable, praise be to God. There is no need for that. She will return to you soon. Believe me, what is this bad omen? Pray for her stability." There was no point in convincing my aunt or anyone else. They will not accept anything new that they do not know, no matter how hard I try. I do not claim that I possess absolute truth, but I possess knowledge that I obtained while standing bewildered in front of it, and the closest explanation for those sciences and information with which my mind is filled is that they are among those vanished sciences. Examples are many and countless of experiments in which I tried these sciences on those around me. I apply the information and do not see the effect. I don't know the explanation. Another example that I can present and expose to the same microscope is sleeping positions. Science advises us on certain positions and forbids others on a purely healthy principle for the safety of the spine and better breathing during sleep, etc. Religion also urges us to sleep on the right side and rest on the stomach. What if science conflicts with religion in this matter? The point is, what if science warned against sleeping on the right side and urged sleeping on the stomach? Everyone will follow what they believe in, but is this evidence of their disbelief in the other? An exhausting question when trying to answer it, but what if there was a third starting point other than religion and science? I know that burying a person in sand, especially of a certain type. Sand is very useful for many diseases and ailments, especially psychological and spiritual ones. Why, I do not know. I know that removing wisdom teeth is a treatment for a disease that I will not mention the name of because I do not have scientific or religious evidence for that. Why is it useful? I also do not know. Is it forbidden to mention these sciences or deal with them? I do not know. No, I think I'm living in a spiral. I want to be silent, but most of the time I can't, especially when I see someone suffering in front of me. The sciences that people have achieved today may be modern for their time, but many of them are undoubtedly not ahead of many previous sciences that disappeared a long time ago. Man's arrogance sometimes prevents him from confessing that someone was ahead of him for something and was trying on purpose. Or subconsciously he obscured or did not mention the possibility that what he brought was not a new science and that it might have been discovered before and even surpassed those who preceded him in it. As the days passed, I began to feel a kind of relief towards this vanished science or the science of the ancients, the origin of which I know nothing about when I saw some its meanings are mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah, and some of it has also been recently reached by modern science, and thus it has gained greater credibility with me and with the people who have tried it with my advice. But what about the rest of the sciences that are nesting in my head? Should I wait for science to prove them? Should I conceal them as many concealed them before me, so that it would emerge that only Amr was the one? He owns books that talk about these sciences. I began to understand why he was not keen. Many of those who acquired this knowledge by writing it down or publishing it were also filled with doubt and feared that they would implicate themselves and the people with them with knowledge that would not only be of no benefit as they are accused, but might also be dangerous to them. The truth is that months passed after I returned to my normal life, during which I came to the conviction that I had not gone through any of that. I went through it before, preparing for demons and talking to them, and I may have just been exposed to excessive thinking, just as a child is exposed to hyperactivity, and that turned into a lapse that I suffered from for years after I stayed in Amber's office for those 3 years, and that everything I read was nothing but a mixture of truth and falsehood, and that all of that information about the demons and masters messed with my mind and made me see them in front of me and interact with them. The issue was simply that I had become insane. I expelled the demons that were around me, and only the demons remained inside my head. It is said that the insane person does not realize that he is insane until he is cured. In a moment of despair, I surrendered and acknowledged what was said to me on more than one occasion, which is I lost my mind, and this is the reason for what I saw that year after I left the library and returned to my homeland. I could have tried reading those talismans that I had learned and seen what would happen in front of me, but that might not have changed the matter at all. Everything that I had gone through and seen in the past was destroyed by witnesses who loved it and did not. None of them survive except my brother, who, as I said previously, he does not remember anything that happened. He does not remember, perhaps because nothing happened in the first place. My brother visited me one day in my room at the request of my mother, who was still insisting that I visit Tamishka to read about me, and as she told me in more than one conversation with her, there is something wrong with you, and to reassure me more. She verified that I was normal. She wanted to obtain accreditation and a certificate of being a practicing religious professional, so I was ignoring her repeated requests for me to go to one of the sheikdom's claimants, whose reputation at that time was as low as possible. I believe his name was Abu al-Bara, but my resistance ended and dissipated after my brother entered my room and sat in front of me, smiling. And he said, "I will ask you for a request that I hope you will not refuse," so I answered him. I smiled back at him. "I will not return it if I can." "I can, but you may not agree." "But I know that the request is from my mother and not from me." I straightened my seat and said with concern, "What's wrong with my mother? Why didn't you ask me for what she wanted directly, because I am the one who will take you?" I looked at him surprised and wondering. "At that time, I want to ask you about something." "What is it?" "Do you remember when you came in and told me that you were suffering from nightmares because of the book that you read in my room during my absence after our relative's son pointed it out to you?" "Yes, I remember." "Do you remember what happened after that?" "What do you mean specifically?" "I entered your room and was covered in blood and crying, and you told me that I asked you to close your eyes a few minutes before, and you opened them to find yourself in that state." "It is true, but what?" "I was not covered in blood, and I did not say that, and I was not crying in the first place. You were the one who walked in on me and hugged me and started crying. I was very confused and I did not want to provoke you by talking to you at that time. The shock was a huge shock. This was the first time I discussed with my brother what happened that day, and I was not prepared for what I heard. I was, as I feared, just a delusional madman. Everything that happened I smiled, my whole world collapsed. There was no domesticity, there were no soldiers, and there was nothing. It was just a hallucination. Crazy symptoms. Typical for anyone with schizophrenia, something I've read about. I know him well, but I never thought that I was afflicted with it. This does not negate the fact that I gained some knowledge from that library, but it seems that my mind could not bear it or the isolation that I suffered with Amr, so he escaped as a form of adaptation to the harsh conditions that were imposed on him, and he has not returned since then, and this is a matter. It is very common with schizophrenia. My brother noticed the shock I was in when I realized that the knowledge of talismans and past memories with demons, masters, and tribes were all a mirage. He said to me with concern, "What's wrong?" My temporary solace in the ruins of the world of the shattered was interrupted. I got up and began to change my clothes and said calmly, "I will not go with you. Tell my mother that you." So if he said that phrase because he knew in advance that I could not bother my mother or father, even about something I had treated like this, so I did not speak to her, trying to convince her of the futility of going to someone who devoted his life to selling his leg to people. I decided to go and end the matter for her sake only, especially after I learned the truth about my madness after 2 kisses and a hug from my mother. I followed it with a quick prayer to God to protect us and my brother, and we headed that afternoon in the car to the house of that thing, which had received high recommendations from some of our family members to my mother, as usual, as she was told, and that he had treated many people with the blessings of reading it. At the first traffic light, we stopped, and then I asked my brother how much he would charge for this. Blessed no. I know, but the usual price is 1 real. I said, laughing. Is there now a stock exchange and you know about these things now? The sheiks of reading in the past used to take what was provided to them and the fixed definition of water and oils. Just I know that you do not want to go, but please do not embarrass us in front of the sheik. I said sarcastically, and what do you think I would do to be embarrassed if not? I am recovering, for example. My brother said, the important thing is that you remain silent as much as possible until we finish. I smiled as I stared at the road in front of me. You do not believe in its benefit like me, do you? I opened the traffic light and my brother moved, saying that the Quran is useful. The Quran is not for humans. My brother said, he is a man who has memorized and is capable, and many have benefited from it. I said while looking out the window. We'll see how much. These are the possibilities for treating insanity. My brother said, you are not crazy, you are just psychologically tired. I said, don't worry, insanity is not a blameworthy thing these days. He will diagnose your condition and know if there is something wrong with you, and he will provide you with the appropriate treatment, God willing. I said sarcastically, a doctor, a laboratory, and a pharmacy in one man. My brother smiled as he stopped the car on the side of the road, saying, stop mocking religion. We have arrived. I stood still and looked in amazement at my brother. We stopped the car next to a large house with wide open doors, and crowds of people of all ages and races gathered inside and outside. It was like a gathering. An entrance for women and an entrance for men. We headed to the section designated for men and sat in the waiting hall, which was crowded with men and children. And the sheiks, my brother spoke with someone who seemed to be the general coordinator of the sheiks' visitors. He returned to the grammar school after he extended a sum of money, the amount of which I could not determine, into the hand of that man. He sat next to me and said, I'm sorry for the sheik. After a while, I smiled as I recalled some childhood memories and said, nothing has changed. What do you mean? She reminded me of my mother when she used to take me to read it to me when I was young. I never expected that I would return to this matter and go through the same experience again. My brother said, just for my mother's sake. I looked at the groups of people sitting and standing and said, yes, just for her sake. The man called us and we entered the old man's room and sat with him, unlike what happened to me and my mother when I was young. Don't be in a rush to get started reading, despite the large numbers that were waiting for him outside, as if he was intentionally keeping this crowded crowd to himself. He was chatting with my brother, and whenever I was away from him, I was watching him while waiting for the diagnostic session. My brother did not say anything useful to him except that I am tired and I need to read, and he said, clenching his beard and staring at me. It's okay, come on, God willing. He started reading and did not put his hand on me, as happened to me when I was young, so I said to myself, it seems that the methods of reading have changed or that they differ from one person to another. My brother looked at me with a frown and frowned upon me when I interrupted him during his reading to correct a mistake in tajweed that he had made. From the first time he said it, it changed. He frowned in anger when I repeatedly interrupted him more than 3 times for the same reason until he said in an angry tone, don't interrupt me. I said sharply, how can I not interrupt you when you are reading incorrectly? He said in an interrogative manner, I think it was a bit artificial. Who are you? I smiled and said, I don't know, tell me. He said with a frown, you did not interrupt the word of God. You don't want to hear it? I said calmly, mixed with some mockery, because you are tampering with the word of God. Read correctly, and I will not interrupt you. He frowned and said angrily, directing his words to my brother. Your brother is confused. Therefore, he refuses to listen to the Quran and interrupts. I laughed and said, I interrupt you because you did not pass the tajweed subject only. Moreover, there is no such thing as confusion. It is a myth. He turned to Ali and continued trying, convincing my brother that I was clothed until I had had enough of the nonsense and got up, saying to my brother, I am outside waiting for you until you finish. I left the place, making my way between the miserable crowds and the people waiting for some time from that blessed place until I arrived outside and leaned on our car, staring at the crowds of people entering and exiting the place. He left. My brother, a few minutes later, with a bag in his hand, said, What did you do? Why did you speak to the sheikh in this manner? What sheikh are you talking about, that fraudster whose education did not go beyond the primary stage? My brother said sadly, What should I tell my mother now? I said sternly, Do not tell her anything. Did you believe what that ignorant person said that I am clothed? He said, Brother, no, I don't know what this is. What is in your hand? My brother went to the car to get in and said, Nothing. I caught up with him. I took the bag from his hand and opened it to find a bottle of oil. I smiled and said, How much did you buy it for? My brother did not answer me. I told him, joking, Come on, tell me how much oil be and water be. I laughed and said, Why didn't you ask for a discount? My brother said, with sadness, Please do not mock religion. I shouted at him without feeling, This is not religion. Why don't you understand? He did not respond to me. I went to the nearest garbage can and threw away the bag with what was in it. My brother got into the car silently, started the engine, and sat inside it. I was standing near the house, watching the people gathered. My brother broke his silence after lowering his window and said, No, we're leaving, I said, staring. At home, what is happening here is wrong. My brother said, We have nothing to do with this. Let's leave. What will you tell my mother? I will not tell anything except that the sheikh said that you are fine. I turned to him and said, My mother will believe the words of someone she has never seen before and lie to the words of her son. My brother said, Can we leave now? Morocco is almost here. During our conversation, a man came out of the old man's house with a tan girl and was crying. The man was holding her shoulders and in his hand was a bag similar to the bag I had just thrown in the garbage. The girl was crying at first, but when she reached the middle of the street, she started screaming and trying to escape from the hands of the man who was apparently her father. Or one of her marams that the girl managed to escape from. He grabbed him, and as soon as she did, she threw away her cloak and began pulling her hair and screaming forcefully in front of people. The sight did not bother me, but I was disturbed when I saw a mark on her forehead, a mark that I had never seen before except in one of Amr's books, and the name Malakiyah, and the name Malakiyah is for the lover of Satan, which I had never seen before on the body of anyone I had never seen before. Drawing in the books, the marking was clear despite the distance that was between us. The man took control of the girl by force and got her into the car and drove away from the place. She subconsciously leaned towards our car and got in and shouted at my brother, Follow him. I will not follow him. I said in a loud voice, Follow that car quickly before it drives away. My brother moved. He was in a hurry and was able to catch up. Because he was stopped by a traffic signal, and while we were standing behind him, he turned to me and said nervously, What's the matter with you? Why are we following them? I said, with my eyes on the car, That girl is not possessed. Have you now believed in touch? Didn't you tell the sheikh that touching is a myth? I said as I turned to him. I did not say that confusion is a myth, but touch is there, and what is the difference? I turned on the signal and the car we were following moved. I told my brother, in a firm tone mixed with some berries, to follow it and not lose it. He said, calm down, calm down. I will follow. We continued following the car for about a quarter of an hour until it stopped in front of one of the houses in the old neighborhood. I asked my brother to stop before he noticed it. He said, why did we sell that one? The car. I said while I was watching the man drop the girl off and take her into the house. I want to check something. Verify what I answered after the man and the girl entered the house. I said, what happened to me? I mean the years in which those books that you read in my absence and that caused you those nightmares were gone. My brother said, and a look of worry appeared on his face. Yes, what is wrong with it? You acquired nightmares, but I acquired knowledge, any knowledge, which I did not ask for, nor did I seek to obtain it, but I cultivated it and learned it. Knowledge that is written down and not printed, exists, and is not proven. What are you talking about? I said to him, as I turned my face towards that girl's house, listen, I will make an agreement with you, an agreement of any kind. I said. And I was staring at the house. What happened to me might have been hallucinations of madness. Maybe I imagined all of that, and I actually started to reach that conviction and believe it. My brother said, what happened to you? You never told me anything. You would just disappear and come back in a different state after every time you disappeared. If what I went through was just a thing. Hallucinations invented by my crazy mind. We will know now. I do not understand anything. I turned to him and said, that girl bears the mark of a demon, a lover, on her forehead. A demon. What, let alone the details. The important thing is what will happen now at sunset. If my intuition is true, what will happen? I said, I return my gaze toward the house. If it is what? It happened to me in reality, not hallucinations. As the sun sets, that house will be covered. Birds are pigeons, most likely pigeons. Yes, masters do not walk without followers when they visit the homes of lovers. This happens at sunset and is often accompanied by hordes of birds, most of which are shaped like devils accompanying him. My brother said, placing his hand on my shoulder sadly. It's okay. We will do what you want. I said while smiling. I know you don't believe me. I don't blame you. There is a part of me that hopes that what I am saying are just fantasies that I have created in my mind. Morocco is about to arrive, and in any case we will know the truth. What I said? I keep staring at the house. Either I am really crazy or not. After a few minutes, the Maghrib call to prayer was called, and my brother and I were staring at the house and the houses next to it. Our car. After the call to prayer had passed, he said in a cautious voice, as if he did not want to bother me. What do you think about us getting out of the car and going to pray in that nearby mosque? Before I answered him, I heard a distant scream for that girl coming from the house. I said, did you hear the screams coming from the house? My brother answered in a consoling tone. Sorry, I did not hear anything. I stared at him silently and thought to myself, saying, is this what crazy people feel? Maybe my hearing is stronger than his because of my activated aura. No, I will not justify myself after today. The truth has unfolded in front of me, and I am trying to deny it. I am not healthy. My mind is deceiving me because it is sick. I must accept this truth and stop trying to prove it. I looked at him. I took him home and then I said. After I became certain that I was wrong and that everything I experienced and believed in the past was an illusion created by a defective mind. Well, let's go and pray. We got out of the car and headed to the mosque and prayed Maghrib. During the prayer, I saw the man who was with the girl praying among the crowds, so I thought about approaching him and talking to him, but I did not because I had the desire but I did not have the reason. I wanted to advise him about going to that charlatan, but at that time my self-confidence had been shaken severely, especially after I discovered that everything I knew was just an illusion. We left the mosque and headed to the car, but before we opened its doors, my brother and I stood amazed and shocked by the sight, which was manifested. In front of us, we saw flocks of pigeons covering the roof of the house. They were in the dozens, even hundreds, and there was no other house in the neighborhood with a single pigeon standing on top of it. Even the neighbors of the house had completely empty rooftops, although the pigeons were competing with each other to stand on the roof as if they were a hive of bees gathered on their queen. I stood amazed at the sight, but my astonishment was not like that of my brother, who kept watching the house with an open mouth until he broke his silence and said, "How did you know?" I said while staring at the roof of the house, "You see what I see, don't you?" I almost smiled, but I settled for looking at the ground in front of me, smiling, and I said, "I'm not crazy, so what do we do now? Shall we go fishing?" My brother said it while he was still confused and stunned, "No, we will not catch anything. We will knock on the door." He said nervously, "Why did I say I am heading to the door of the house? This girl will not live long, and I know how to help her." My brother's world pulled me by the arm, saying, "What do you intend to do?" I promised myself that I would not read talismans to help her with it without losing myself. In that darkness again, my brother said, and his tension increased, "It's getting dark. Let's leave here, please." I rang the doorbell and I said, "Just stay with me and don't talk." The door opened for us. That man whom we saw with the girl had great sadness on his face, and his eyes were pale, as if they had not tasted sleep in a while. Days, and he said yes, I don't know why. But I was not able to speak at first. I did not know what I could say to that man and how to explain to him what was happening with that girl without him misunderstanding me. During my silence, my brother spoke in a moment of confusion and said, "Will you allow us to enter?" The man said, surprised, "Why, who are you and what do you want?" My brother said, with a smile closed with concern, "We want to talk to you about a private matter, if you please." I was surprised by my brother's courage in that confusing moment, but what he did encouraged me a little and relieved my tension. We entered and sat in the council, and the man sat in front of us and said, "What's the matter?" My brother looked at me with his look. "What do you have to say?" I gathered my strength and said, "Girl. The girl I was with at the Sheikh's. This afternoon," the man said. "What's wrong with her?" "She screams in her sleep. She wakes up with bruises and wounds on her body. She cries for no reason. She suddenly becomes angry, especially at night. She has fits of anger that enable her to resist and attack those who are larger than her in size and strength, despite her emaciated body. She only eats sweet-tasting things. She hates water and bathing." He interrupted me. The man had a mixture of anger and astonishment on his face and said angrily, "Who are you and how did you know all this information about my wife?" My brother said nervously, "We work for the sheikh and we joined you after you left because he forgot to tell you something important. He tells me what I will slap you with. Give your wife a drink of it once a day for only 3 days and she will get better. God willing, is this? The recipe is from the sheikh." I said on the contrary, yes, from the sheikh." "Throw away the water and oils he gave you." The man said, "Throw them away. What about the high price you paid for it? Is this a trick to get more money? The treatment I just gave you for free. And what about the money I paid for it?" The previous one turned to my brother at a sign from me to pay the man the value of the water and oils that he had taken from the old man's body. He did so, and after the man took the money, he said aggressively, "I have been seeing the sheikh for weeks, and I have not seen anything from him before." My brother said nervously, "Maybe you did not notice. The man looked at us with suspicion, saying, "Did you? You are confident that nothing will happen without God's permission." The man said, "And God bless him." My brother got up and said nervously, "Let's go where?" I said, "Get up. We will leave. God willing, you will not need anything other than this treatment." I shook hands with the man and went out, leaving my brother with him to say goodbye. I got to the car. My brother followed me a few minutes later. I got in with him and we headed home. On the way, he said nervously, "I have a feeling that we have committed a crime. When you say these words, we have prescribed a treatment without knowledge, and that woman may die and we will go to prison because of you." I said while smiling, "God willing, she will recover." Eating this mixture has a strong effect on the demons in love, as they cannot stand the smell that will emanate from her body as a result of consuming it, and he will abandon her without returning. What do you know? Tell you. I did not answer about that recipe and about what demons you were talking about. I was busy with myself and crazy high. My mind was busy searching for more evidence and clues to prove that I was right and that the past that I went through was not the creation of my imagination. But how, when I had promised myself that I would not go back to reading talismans or anything related to that world? My brother interrupted my frantic thoughts while I was biting my nails on the run. He said, "Won't you answer me? I read it in a book." "What book? How do you know that what you read is true and not just written myths?" I smiled and said, staring at the road in front of me, "We'll see. Don't talk like that in front of my mother so she won't force us to come back." To the sheik, once again, I laughed, and I haven't laughed in a long time. I was happy. I felt relieved. I am not crazy. We returned home that day and each of us went to his room. After we passed by our mother, we kissed her head and reassured her that the old man told us that I was not suffering from anything except occasional fatigue. Days passed, and during that time life was very normal. I went to work in the morning, followed by regular visits to my friends at night, and even reading and writing. At dawn, during that period, the effect of activating my aura on me was still strong, and I did not sleep much. I lay down for a few hours after the dawn prayer only until it was time for my work. Latency is a state of complete relaxation, like yoga, without entering a deep sleep. Later, I learned to control my awareness more and became able to sleep, stealing hours or less. Deep sleep, especially in Ramadan, as my aura stabilizes greatly during the holy month. This was the summary of my life, a routine that was boring and beautiful at the same time. But what happened about 2 weeks after we went to Al-Mustasam changed that path a little, as I received a call on my mobile phone from a strange number one morning. Before I went to work, I thought it was a wrong call because no one knows my number except those close to me, and they are very specific and know that I do not like talking on the phone, and they contact me via text messages because it is the guaranteed way for me to respond immediately. I was unaware of that call, but I answered, and after I answered, I was surprised that it was a person. He says, "Peace be upon you, Sheikh. Excuse me. It seems that you made a mistake in calling. Aren't you the one who visited me 2 weeks ago and treated my wife?" I stopped for a moment to retrieve my memory. I remembered that he was that man whom my brother and I had followed after we left the Mom's house. I said to him, "Excuse me, I am not a sheikh." "Then where did you get the phone number?" "I took my number from your friend who was with you before he passed away, and now that my wife has recovered, thanks to you, after months of suffering with the disease, I loved calling you to thank you." This was thanks to God, not me. And God is blessed with that. Whoever does not thank people does not thank God for forgiveness. I hope for her continued health and well-being. I hung up and then went to my brother's room. Immediately, I went in to find him asleep, so I sat next to him on the edge of the bed and woke up saying, "Get up, I want to talk to you." "What's the matter?" he said while wiping the sleepiness from his eyes. The man's wife has recovered. What man are you talking about? The man to whom I prescribed the mixture to treat his wife 2 weeks ago. My brother said while hugging his pillow and closing his eyes. Oh, yes, I remembered, thank God, we will not go to prison. If I smiled and said, when I gave him my number, my brother opened his eyes with his head still on the pillow. Are you angry because I gave him your phone number? I was forced to do that because he said that he recorded the license plate number and that he would inform the police if something bad happened to his wife after taking the prescription. If I didn't give him the number, no, I wouldn't. Angry, on the contrary, I feel happy. My brother said, because she has recovered, no, because I have recovered from what you were complaining to say that. I was complaining of doubt in myself, and loss of confidence in her, because now I have regained that, or at least part of it. That evening, I went out as usual to go to my friends on the farm, and I saw a man. He was waiting for me at the door, just waiting. He did not look forward to the door, as if he wanted to meet me without announcing his arrival to the rest of the house. I do not know, but for him to stand in front of the door in that way was not comfortable at first. The man's external appearance was the type that I would not prefer to talk to. This is not a disparagement, but my history with this woman. Category did not. He was bright. His clothes were short, he wore a red shemak without a headband, he had a thick black beard, his mustache was shaved, the head of a wetsuwak peeking out of his front pocket, his eyes were covered with kohl, and the tips of his toes indicated that he was bending the bottoms of his feet from time to time. This became clear to me from the different shades of henna between his fingers. His body was slender and white. The complexion, his nose is flat, and his forehead is broad. During this quick assessment of his external appearance, the man took a grammatical step and said with a smile, "Peace be upon you and peace be upon you." "Yes, what do you want?" The bearded man said, "I want to talk to you." "I apologize. I am in a hurry." I said it as I was getting into my car. A man said, "Can I ride with you then and talk? During the road until you reach your destination." "Who are you?" "Someone wants to talk to you about a topic." "No more." "You are talking to me now." "I do not mean in a place where we can talk comfortably. It is not in my nature to agree to such a strange request, especially from a person who apparently was not among the category of people I prefer to talk to. But I agreed, and he actually got in the car and drove towards the farm. I expected that the man would enter directly into the matter and start talking to me as soon as he closed the door, but he took out his toothpick and began rubbing his teeth with the head of his brush, staring silently in front of him. Half the way passed and we passed 2 traffic lights, at which we stopped for enough minutes for him to talk, but he remained as he was. He was silent and did not speak. I was not indulging in the open psychological tricks, and I was also not going to speak before him, a short distance before we reached the farm. The man finally spoke and said, without turning to the mixture that I described to Abdel Aziz's wife, "Where did you get it from? I mean, do you know that it would have been useful?" Of course, it was not necessary. If I ask who Abdul Aziz is, it is clear that he meant the man who called me to thank me that morning, so I said, looking at the road in front of me and my hands gripping the steering wheel, "Why don't you stop dribbling and tell me your purpose in talking to me? We have approached the place, and I will not talk to you any more after we arrive, so don't waste time on yourself," said the man. Bearded, I was one of the slaves to whom Abdul Aziz resorted to read to his wife during her illness. I said sarcastically, "Did she benefit from your blessing?" "Your sarcasm will not provoke me, and I am not here to compare my knowledge with yours." "What science are you talking about?" "The science of spitting and oils." "No, I do not sell oils, nor do I ask for a fee in exchange for helping people. Take what I take. They only give it to me because you are not helping them in the first place. What about you?" How long have you been practicing your work in therapy? I do not practice anything, and what happened with your client was just a coincidence. Do you view patients as clients? I stopped the car on the side of the road and turned to the man who was still brushing his teeth with the siwak. He looked at me coldly and I said indignantly, "What do you want?" "I want to benefit Muslims and earn the reward for helping them only and nothing else. What do I have to do with his noble endeavor?" I said it sarcastically. "I want you to be with me in this endeavor. I want you to share the reward with me." I said laughing, "No thanks." "Okay. I will be frank with you now. I can listen to you seriously. Here you go. There is no shame in being a healer. Like a doctor or a comforter for the pain of patients, even if you get paid for that, never. But it is also shameful and forbidden to be a fraudster and trade in the name of religion and sell illusions to them." The bearded man said, "You are not selling illusions, and I want to buy the truth from you. I am talking about you, deceiver, and I am not selling anything." To someone, the man said, "Listen, whatever the amount offered. I am grateful for your frankness and your implicit admission that you are a fraud, but do not think that money will be a reason for me to deceive people and deceive them like you. If your treatments are useful, then where is the deception in that?" I began to feel upset and bored with that conversation. There is nothing worse than talking to a swindler except talking to a fraudster without a conscience, so I told him. I frowned, trying to end the discussion. "Thank you for your tempting offer, but I do not intend to pursue this profession, neither for money nor for anything else. I will not turn to the thing that I have fought all my life, no matter what happens." He said coldly, "I have an incurable condition. I read about it several months ago. A boy was suddenly paralyzed, and the doctors confirm that he is healthy and does not suffer from anything. A physical problem. Didn't you hear what I said? You have to repent." The man continued to ignore my words and said, "His father is a very rich man, and no matter how much I try to promote him, he will not improve. The problem is not with what you read, but with the reader. You are an exploitative person, and your first and last goal is money, so reading him is useless. I know that is why I need you to treat this young man. We can split the amount between us." I was astonished at that man was lost, and at the same time I felt a strange desire to delve further into the investigations of his sick mind, so I said, "Okay, settle down," on the condition that the man put his saliva-soaked siwak in his pocket and said, smiling, "I agree without hearing your condition that we do this without taking anything in return." What is without compensation? What is the purpose of that? If the reward. And the reward, of course, wasn't this what you said a while ago? Well, okay, yes, okay. I will call the man now. No, wait, not now. I could not prevent the excited man from taking out his phone and calling someone who he did not talk to much and did not say to him except a few words through which he asked permission to visit him at that late hour, and from what I understood, the speaker on the other end agreed without objection. He hung up his phone and motioned for me to move. I told him where to go to the man's house. Of course, that is, the man. The father of the patient we are going to treat. Have you forgotten? I don't even know your name. You want me to go with you to an unknown place at this hour of the night. I am Awad. Can we go now? He said with a smile, "Yes, where?" "The house is located," I said, apprehensively to the unfortunate owner, while we were driving in the car towards the address that Awad had provided me with. I was not, in fact, enthusiastic about that meeting, and I was hoping to God in His will that something would happen that would disrupt us or cancel the appointment in one way or another, but that did not happen and we arrived at a large house. We stopped the car and got out. From there, we were greeted by a man who appeared to be wealthy, although he was not formal in his dress. He welcomed us and invited us to enter. It was clear that he knew Awad previously, so his side conversation with him indicated an old relationship. I followed him silently inside, and as soon as I stepped inside the house, I felt a tightness in my chest that I had not felt. It's been there for a long time. It was a long time, and Awad noticed that about me and said, "Are you okay?" I answered him yes, but I was not okay. It was like someone having an asthma attack, and my breathing became short. I did not regain some of my health until I sat in the council and drank some of the water that was placed before us. The conversation that took place between the owner of the house and Awad was direct. He told him that he brought me with him to examine his son and spoke untrue things about me and raised my status a lot in front of that man, but I did not interfere because I did not like the whole thing from the beginning, but I wanted to see where I would end up with him. I do not deny that curiosity was a main reason for him agreeing to come with Awad. I spent many years fighting people like him, and I found a new and somewhat beautiful thrill in seeing the work of these swindlers up close. During Awad's conversation with the owner of the house, the man suddenly turned to me and said, "Thank you, Sheikh, for your presence. I am not a sheikh. Do you see the features of Sheikh Ali?" Awad said with some confusion. He prefers the title of healer. I am not a healer either. The man said, "What are you?" Then I know that spiritual healers fear security prosecution while practicing their profession. Don't worry, you are safe here. I turned my gaze to Awad and expressed with a sullen look my discomfort with the dialogue. Awad said to the man nervously, "We don't have much time. Can you show us the way so that my friend can examine us?" "Your son," the man stood up and said, "Of course." He led us to the upper floor, specifically to one of the rooms that were spread throughout. As we ascended, the tightness that I was feeling in my chest increased until we stopped in front of the room and he opened its door, saying, "Come in." Awad motioned for me to go ahead of him, so I took cautious steps into the room, and as soon as I entered it, the tightness in my chest turned into a mild headache, and I saw a young man. In his early 20s, he was lying on a bed with a pale face, and signs of illness were evident on him while I was holding him. The man spoke from behind me and said, "My son has been in this condition for more than a year. He does not move or speak, and I was not able to determine what ailment he was suffering from, and I did not find a cure for him anywhere that cured him. God bless him." I said it as I stood between the entrance and the bed, looking at that withered young man. Awad said, "Sit next to him, Sheikh." Despite my annoyance at his use of the word sheikh to describe me, I did not comment and kept looking at that young man. There was something strange about him. A strong negative energy disturbed my mood and upset my balance. His father entered the room and pulled out a chair. He placed it next to his son's bed and motioned for me to sit in front of him. I do not know what happened after I sat in front of him, but I saw the problem and its cause in my mind. I saw things in the room that may seem normal to many, but for me they were out of the ordinary and had another meaning and meaning. My mind analyzed and interpreted without my command, and I found myself. Subconsciously I asked the man whether you have a maid. He said, "Yes." "Do you want me to call her?" "No." I directed my gaze to the floor below me, which was made of ceramic. Then I raised my head to the curtain behind the bed, and the matter became clear to me. I asked the man's permission and said, "Will you allow me to raise the bed mattress a little and look underneath?" The man answered hesitantly, "Yes, I don't mind." My friends, you can support the channel through the affiliation feature or by clicking on YouTube. Thank you, and your publishing this clip helps the channel reach the largest number of people to encourage us to continue.